All this and more coming up in today's Going Underground. But first, I'm here at the D Contemporary Gallery in Mayfair in London with the High Representative to the United Kingdom of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, Karwan Jamal Tahir. Thank you so much for inviting us into the gallery. Can I just ask you first, tell me about the exhibition here in London and how it is inspired by the journeys of a community that is, what, up to 35 million people in the world?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me today, and thanks for coming to this art exhibition. This art exhibition is part of the concept of our cultural diplomacy of Kurdistan Regional Government representation here in London. We initiated this project for one, to promote the Kurdish culture here in Britain. Second, to create a platform for our artists in Kurdistan region so they can get out from local exhibition to international exhibition.
Because they're from Iraq and from Syria and the whole different regions.
No, this is particularly from Kurdistan region of Iraq. So the artist came from Kurdistan region of Iraq. We have 5 artists who contributed or participated in this art exhibition. And it is a reflection of the years of denial, repression of the Kurdish people in Kurdistan region under the hand of dictatorship Saddam Hussein throughout his rule in Iraq. And also reflecting the values that we believe in Kurdistan region, the values of peace, the values of coexistence, and the values of empowerment of women, rule of law.
You mentioned injustice there. I understand you're going to have a rally at the House of Commons about the Halabja massacre, the anniversary of which is on the 17th of March. Just explain what the Halabja massacre was, because obviously that was a time when the United States and Britain supported Saddam Hussein.
Yes. Well, let me add that to the art exhibition. I was so pleased and delighted that this art exhibition coincided with tumultuous events in March. One of them is Halabja, that you just mentioned, an uprising in Kurdistan region. The Kurdish people in Kurdistan region swept the regime, the Ba'ath regime, and the Iraqi military within the Kurdistan region territory. We stood for our freedom and democracy, and the uprising itself in Kurdistan region was response to the years of denial and repression under the dictatorship in Iraq.
Some viewers may not even realize that the British and the United States supported Saddam Hussein. Just tell me about the Halabja massacre, just very briefly, to remind our viewers what it was.
In 1988, Saddam Hussein gassed the city of Halabja. 5,000 civilian, elderly people, young people, children were killed in a blink of an eye, and 10,000 were injured and affected by this poison gas, and still have, and that caused a long-term illness for the people in Halabja.
Were the chemical weapons sent by the Americans? Were they sold to Saddam Hussein? I know this is all history now, of course, but as regards justice, presumably the Kurdish community have never seen justice for their people because of the aftermath of the Halabja.
Well, the chemical hasn't been sent by any particular country. Saddam Hussein and its regime had capability of producing chemical material in Iraq, and they had this chemical weapon in Iraq. There was a company across country, different nationality were involved in that, and some of the company provided Iraq with, with this chemical material, and the production of the weapon itself were all Iraqi inside Iraq.
And however many years on, you now have cordial relations with the British Foreign Office as High Representative of Kurdistan. Were you surprised that the first big major foreign visit of Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, was to Turkey to shake hands with Mr. Erdogan?
Well, this international relation, every country try to the maximum to maintain good relationship with international community. And it's worth mentioning that in 1991, Britain, at the time, Sir John Major and his government initiated the no-fly zone in Kurdistan region to protect the Kurds from Saddam Hussein and its military to return back and attack the Kurdish people. And at that time, we started to establish our democratic institution. We had the first democratic election in 1992 when we elected our parliament and then our own government in Kurdistan region. So since then, Kurdistan become a region of emerging democracy within this very tough
Well, some viewers
place.
are going to be surprised about the fact that you mentioned that, given 500,000 children reputedly were killed by the sanctions by Western governments on Iraq during the John Major government. You're saying the no-fly zone, which was obviously a precursor to the all-out invasion of Iraq. Looking back, you see that as a good thing. The reason I'm asking, of course, is in recent years, the Kurds and the Kurdish communities
Yes.
have aligned themselves very strongly with Washington in Syria.
Well, of course it was a very good thing because Saddam
Well, not
Hussein...
500,000 children dying because of UN sanctions supported by...
There was a sanction on Iraq as a whole. And there was two sanctions on Kurdistan region at the time. One, international sanction, and second, Iraq sanction on Kurdistan region, because Kurdistan region were not longer under the jurisdiction or control of the dictatorship since 1991. But there was also a program, Oil for Food.
Oil for food.
So the international community or the United Nations
But you know
agencies
that
made
there have been
sure
studies
that
about this that have shown hundreds of thousands of children died under this program. The reason of the relevance today, obviously, is that the Kurdish community have become deeply involved in the proxy war in Syria. Britain, of course, bombed Syria. What side are the Kurds on, and have they made a historic mistake by aligning themselves with Washington in Syria? Given that President Assad of Syria are now saying, we won't even talk to the Kurdish community in Syria until they stop being the tool of outside proxies.
Well, it's a very complex situation in the area, and especially in Syria. The major powers conflict in that region made this conflict
Yeah, but
prolonged.
you're the High Representative in London, and the Kurds aligned themselves, according to Assad, according to Putin, according to Rouhani. You guys allied with the CIA.
No, that's not a true statement. I'm representing Kurdistan region of Iraq. I'm not representing the Kurds in Syria or Kurds in Turkey or Kurd in Iran. We maintain a very good relationship with the United States of America and the other countries as well. They were there for us at the time of need. United States helped Kurdistan region throughout the conflict, and without the support of international community, we wouldn't be able to mark these victories, and especially during the ISIS war.
So you're fine with the United States support for Kurdish groups in northern Syria and elsewhere, and you're fine with Donald Trump's announcement that obviously he was withdrawing financial support for Kurdish groups in northern Syria.
We were disappointed by that decision to withdraw over the sudden from Syria and leave the Kurdish group.
But what do you think President Assad thinks of that response?
But in fact, they didn't leave. They were still there, and they still consider the Kurdish people in Syria as their credible partner. And their statement is always that they have an accomplished job.
So your position as a representative here in London is that the United States has a role to play in Syria, which of course is completely rejected by President Assad in Damascus.
The situation is really complex. United States is there in Syria. Some of the country are there. And sometimes the colliding interest between these major powers made the situation even worse.
And arguably, there's been a lot of criticism of Kurdish groups across the whole spectrum for their different positions. What is your position, for instance, on the assassination by Donald Trump's forces of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general? Because, as far as I understand it, London has never condemned the assassination.
Well, we were really concerned about this situation because we want to maintain a good relationship with everyone. And we don't want Iraq to become a battlefield for these major powers to settle their differences on Iraqi soil. So at the beginning, when the incident happened, we tried to play our role in de-escalating the situation.
Surprised that London didn't condemn the assassination?
London had their view on the incident, and they made a statement on the incident, and you should ask the government of Britain about this question.
High Representative, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I don't know if I can shake hand because we have to prevent ourselves from this coronavirus.
Actually, now you mentioned coronavirus, what is the extent of coronavirus in Iraq?
Well, this epidemic, it's affecting the entire world. We took all measures to close down our borders with Iran at the very beginning, limiting the flight in and out into Kurdistan and out of Kurdistan region. We've been educating the people or the population in Kurdistan region to avoid themselves from gathering and this washing hand that everyone talking about it. We have 16 cases. We have one dead who had a underlying condition. That's why been become very ill and affected. We have quarantine places which we hold 2,000 people at the moment. 800 of them returned to their families and home. And I think we've been taking tough measures in Kurdistan region to stop the spread of this virus across Kurdistan region.
High Representative, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the exhibition here at the D Contemporary Gallery is on till Wednesday, the 18th of March.